It began in the dead of night, when the world felt quiet yet wrong. A single sound can make the hairs on your neck stand up. A creak, a whisper, or the soft shuffle of footsteps when no one should be there.
It started late one night, the kind of late where the world feels empty, the streets silent, and even the city lights seem hesitant.
A man arrived at a small hotel that no guidebook mentioned. The neon sign outside flickered weakly, buzzing in the cold night air. The building was old, paint peeling in patches, windows grimy, and the lobby smelled faintly of mildew and dust.
The clerk at the front desk was polite but distant, like he'd been expecting someone like the man, though the hotel never seemed busy. He handed him a key to the third floor, room 312. Nothing unusual, or so it seemed.
The moment the man stepped inside the room, he felt it, an odd heaviness in the air, a silence that wasn't empty but thick. The lights were dim, flickering slightly, casting the corners into shadows. The bedspread was neat, but the corners of the mattress looked like they had been disturbed recently.
He set his bag down and turned to close the curtains. That's when he heard it, the faintest sound of breathing from the far corner of the room. He froze, heart pounding. Slowly, he scanned the room. Nothing moved. He tried to laugh it off, telling himself it was the pipes or the old walls settling.
Minutes later, he heard it again. A shuffling sound, almost like footsteps pacing just inside the room, but always at the edge of hearing. He moved to the door, opening it slightly, peeking into the hallway. Empty. Quiet.
He returned to the bed, tried to ignore it, but the feeling of being watched only grew. Shadows seemed to move at the corner of his eyes, subtle, almost imperceptible, but wrong. The reflection in the small mirror didn't match his movements exactly. He swore he caught a glimpse of something standing behind him, something tall and thin.
Sleep was impossible. Hours passed. At 3 a.m., the footsteps stopped, replaced by a soft scratching at the bathroom door. Slowly, almost hesitantly, the man approached. The scratching grew louder, rhythmic, deliberate. He flung the door open. Nothing, just the pale tiles, the sink, the empty bathtub.
By morning, he was exhausted, tense, shaking. He called the front desk. The clerk answered calmly, almost too calmly, and asked if he'd been comfortable. The man explained everything, the sounds, the shadows, the feeling of being watched. The clerk paused, then handed him a sheet of paper. It listed every guest who had stayed in room 312 over the last year. Many had left abruptly, citing strange noises or unexplainable events. A few names were crossed out entirely, vanished from the system. The man's stomach dropped. He checked out immediately, refusing to look back. But as he walked to the street, he glanced at the window. There, standing silently in the corner of the room, was a figure, pale, tall, impossibly still, watching him. The lights flickered. When he blinked, it was gone.
He never returned, but weeks later he found online posts from other travelers who had stayed in that same room. The stories were nearly identical. Breathing, footsteps, reflections that didn't match. All of them ended with the same chilling realization. The room didn't forget. Even now, months later, he can't shake the thought that it remembered him. And somewhere in that old hotel, the room waits, patient, silent, watching.
It was the kind of place people didn't talk about. Hidden in the woods, past twisted trees and thick undergrowth, there was a graveyard that had been abandoned for decades. The locals avoided it. They said the fog never lifted, the air always felt heavier, and sometimes at night you could hear whispers that didn't belong to anyone alive.
One evening, a man curious about the stories decided to explore it. He brought only a flashlight and a camera. The path to the graveyard was narrow, overgrown, with roots twisting like serpents underfoot. By the time he reached the clearing, the sun had almost disappeared, leaving only a fading orange glow through the dense canopy. The first thing he noticed was the smell: damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else, metallic, faint, unpleasant. The gravestones were cracked and leaning, many swallowed by moss or broken by time. Most had names and dates that went back over a century.
But one grave stood out. There was no marker, no stone, nothing to indicate what or who was buried there. The soil was freshly turned. He stepped closer. The flashlight beam wavered as a sudden gust of wind rattled the branches. The temperature dropped, his breath forming small clouds in the air. He bent down, brushing away the leaves from the mound. That's when he heard it, a low, guttural whisper from beneath the soil. He froze, heart hammering.
There was no wind, no movement, yet the whisper continued, louder now, like someone or something was trying to speak, but the words were muffled, impossible to understand. He stumbled back, shining his light around. Shadows stretched unnaturally, flickering in the corners of his vision.
He decided to film, hoping the camera would provide some evidence. The screen revealed strange anomalies, shapes moving just beyond the trees, shadows that didn't match the branches. One after another, the shadows seemed to creep closer, always staying at the edge of the light.
He tried to leave, but the forest seemed to close in. Every path he took curved back to the grave. The whispers intensified, joined by faint scratching sounds, like nails on wood or claws on dirt. Panic set in. He ran blindly through the clearing, tripping over roots, tearing his clothes on the branches, the whispers following him.
Finally, he reached the edge of the woods and collapsed. His camera, still recording, captured one last image: the unmarked grave, now empty, and a figure standing silently behind it. Its face was impossible to see, but it radiated presence, watching him. When he reviewed the footage later, the image chilled him further. The figure appeared in the frame multiple times, closer each time, though he had never seen it during his frantic escape. He never returned to that graveyard, but he couldn't forget the whispers, the shadows, the figure. And at night, he often feels it, something just beyond the corner of his vision, watching, waiting. It began as a simple walk along a remote trail. A man had taken his dog out for an evening stroll, the sun setting low behind the hills. The forest was quiet, except for the occasional rustle of leaves or the dog sniffing the underbrush. Then he saw it, a figure standing motionless between two large pines 50 feet away. At first he thought it was a hiker, frozen in place. But as he approached, something felt off. The figure was unnaturally still, its posture rigid, its proportions wrong, too long in the limbs, too thin. It didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. The dog barked once, sharply, then froze, staring at the figure. The man's gut tightened. He tried to shake off the unease, telling himself it was a trick of the fading light, but the figure remained. As he walked past, he glanced back. It had moved, not like a human would move, but in sudden bursts, as if sliding from one spot to another. His pace quickened. The forest seemed to close in. Every shadow along the trail stretched and shifted, as if alive. By the time he reached the trailhead, dusk had fallen completely. He noticed the prints in the dirt, long, narrow, impossibly large, human-like, but elongated, leaving a pattern that made no sense. He thought the ordeal was over. He got home, locked the doors, tried to ignore the feeling that followed him. But at night,
The scratching began. On windows, on walls, subtle, patient, deliberate. The dog refused to sleep in the same room.
Over the next few nights, strange things happened. Footsteps outside his house when no one was there. Shadows moving at the corner of his vision. Items in his home displaced, though he lived alone. And then the hardest part. The feeling of being observed never left.
He could sense it waiting for him, patient and silent, never attacking, just watching. Even now, he will walk a familiar path and stop suddenly, certain that he has seen the figure again, lurking between the trees, waiting for him to notice. The trail, the forest, and the woods seem connected to it in a way he cannot explain, leaving him with the haunting certainty that what he saw wasn't human, and it never leaves its mark behind entirely.